Welcome to day 10 of Voice of Today, and I kind of left you hanging after number 9 with Abraham and Isaac, and so we want to jump right into that in Hebrews 11 verse 17, and it reads like this. By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, for whom it was said, in Isaac shall your seed be, or in Isaac your seed shall be called, in the New King James. Concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he had also received him in a figure or in a figurative sense. Now let's look at what's going on here. The sacrifice, as I said in the previous devotional, the sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham has been used to galvanize this self-sacrifice, give it up for Jesus, lay it on the altar, don't have things before God, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. And it's been used to galvanize that religious spirit upon the church and put throngs of people in bondage. Yet we see here he's being identified, this story has been identified as an example of faith. So let's break this down. Let's read this again. Verse 17, chapter 11. By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called. The promise that God had given Abraham all through those years was, in your seed, from your seed shall your descendants shall be as the sands of the sea, and as the stars of heaven. And we know that Jesus came through this lineage, because that was the seed. But I digress. In our context of what we're talking about now, so he had a promise. Abraham had a promise, and that promise produced substance and evidence of what he hoped for. So when God said, slay your son, it said that he concluded that God was able to raise him from the dead, because he'd already received him raised from the dead in a figure. And wow, does that put it in a different light? How many preachers have you heard? Oh, Abraham, when he received that commandment of God, oh, how difficult it must have been, trudging up that hill, knowing that he was going to have to sacrifice his only son. How difficult that must have been, and put all this glory on Abraham's dedication and his commitment and his obedience to that rigid command of God. But right here it says, Abraham was in the promise. Abraham knew that no matter what God asked him to do, that from Isaac's seed would all the stars of his descendants would emerge. And so much so that he received him raised from the dead in a figure, concluding that God was able to raise him from the dead. This is the first example of resurrection faith. The resurrection faith of Christ was imparted unto Abraham. This was a foreshadowing and a forerunner of the faith of Christ that's based on his resurrection. So Abraham was not trudging up that hill. He'd already received Isaac raised from the dead in a figure. Wow. So this was not an obedience of sacrifice. This was the obedience of faith. And I'm going to tell you, in the new covenant, if you're sacrificing things because you think God is going to be pleased by your sacrifice, and in your heart of hearts you're really wanting to do this, but you're just buckling down and sacrificing it, and you're not doing it in the spirit of faith, you're under the law. If you're under the law, you're under the curse. And it's not going to work out for you. It's going to boomerang on you. I'm telling you. Now, does this mean that we don't do what appears to others as sacrificial things? You know, I can give you so many examples, but in this particular case, What looks like sacrifice to somebody else was actually faith and substance of what he hoped for, being expressed and demonstrated by Abraham, because he received him raised from the dead in a figure. You know, I don't have time to develop this, but over in John 15, when Jesus says, ask whatever you will and it shall be done. If you abide in me and my word abide in you, ask what you will and it shall be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit. And then a few verses later, he says to lay down your life for your friend, lay down your life for your brother. Can you lay down your life for someone else and it be in the spirit of substance and evidence of things hoped for? Can it be the very zenith of what you ask for? Because that's the context. Abide in me and my word abide in you, and you'll ask what you will, and it shall be done for you. And then a few verses later, he says, in this is love, that you lay down your life for your brother. So the sacrifice is what looks like sacrifice to someone else is actually done in the substance and evidence of what we hope for. Our giving, when we give of our finances to help someone or give, it should not be, well, I got to do this because I got to tithe. It should be in the faith, the substance and evidence of things hoped for. It should be from grace. That's a whole other subject, and I won't jump over there, but it's grace. It's the sufficiency of grace that empowers us to give. And it's grace that empowers us to lay down things and not put things before God. I'm going to tell you, if something you love and you think, oh, this has become an idol in my life and I don't want to put this before the Lord, don't try to sacrifice it. Go to him who's in you. It's Christ who's in you, both to will and do of. It's God who's in you, both to will and do of his good pleasure. Just declare that. And it is not I who live, but it's Christ who lives within me. And the life I live in this flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God. That's where you go. And then the Spirit of God inside of you will just begin to express himself through you. And you will put down those things that are not pleasing. And those things that have improper priority in your life will now take on the proper priority, not by your sacrifice, but by your faith. By your faith. All right, I've got a lot more to say about this, and we'll continue with Abraham and Isaac and bring this home because it's a beautiful